Hello, 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 and welcome everybody. I'm starting a little bit early, you guys, because I do have something to do this afternoon, but I've got a couple of hours before I've got to do that. So I figured I'd go online early and see how much of this we can get through. It's 175 pages. Now, this is the transcript of the closed hearing that was held on January 23rd that we were not privy to. And now we are going to be able to go through the transcript and see exactly what happened during that hearing. Since we were not allowed to see it, we weren't allowed to stream it. So now we got the transcript. Okay, this is a certified transcript right from the court. Let me say hello to a few people as we wait for everybody to get in. Good morning, Nana. Hello, Kate Bell. Yes, please hit that like on your way in so it gets us out there in the algorithm so we can get going even quicker on this because everybody will be here. Sherry, hello from North Dakota. I hope you're having beautiful weather. Bluey Lou, hello, hello. Kay Mitch, hello, hello. And Kate Bell, I've got your painting done, so I'm just getting it all set up to get it in a frame. Cat H. Hello, Cat H, and welcome. Okay, so as you can see, we've got that up on the screen. We will be starting as soon as we get the people in here. We will start. Hello, Jeff H, and welcome. I hope you're having a good day so far, all of you. Now, there's a lot of this that's very repetitive and stuff, but we're going to go through it. We'll get through as much as we can today. I'm hoping to get through it all. Like I said, there's a lot of scolding going on where the judge is scolding Ann Taylor. It seems to be a never-ending story when it comes to Ann Taylor getting scolded. But let's get going. Oh, Jeff H says, Cat H and I aren't related, so no need for any IGG on us. Oh, good way to start off the live stream today, you guys. I hope everybody's having a good weekend so far. We are in the middle of another snowstorm coming in, so good place for me to be right now. Annie says she's on a road trip. Nana, he was just joking because he's Jeff H and we've got Cat H in the chat too. Cat H says, "Yeah, never know." Oh, that's great. What a good way to start off the live, you guys. I love you guys. Oh, you guys always make my day. So you're saying there's a chance, Cat H? Okay, and if you do, I'm almost done this cold, you guys, but if you do see me mute for a moment, that is because I'm coughing and you guys just don't need to hear that. Annie says, Sadly, the judge knows, and Taylor has to fight every piece of evidence that you can come up with an argument. So scolding her is sad, in my opinion. No, 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 Annie. I think you. I didn't get a chance, I guess, to maybe explain that a little bit more. This is on court protocol and procedure. Like things that she should know has absolutely nothing to do with evidence or anything like that. This has to do with court procedure that she is scolded on more than once. I mean, this is law 101. You know what I mean? And it's like, come on, Anne, do better. I know that she's under the gun. I know that, we may not like, Ann Taylor and some of her antics that she's pulled, but she has to try everything because they've got such a weak case. You guys, if they didn't have a weak case for the defense, they would not be fighting as hard as they are. Like, this is the third time this IGG is being fought about. Okay. She was denied by both judges. Then now this is the part of a Frank's hearing on it. You'll see as we get into it, you guys. I get it. She's trying everything, and I think she's going a little bit harder. So Bryan Kohberger could never say ineffective counsel. If you didn't see my live from yesterday, another lawyer has come on board who is a DNA expert, very well known, very well respected. So, I mean, I get it. I get it. But there's also a limit, right? So give me 2 seconds, guys. Okay, I just forgot where I put my mouse pad. It goes all over the place because I got different computers that I work on for different things. So my mouse pad was on the other one, and I need it for this, that's for sure. So I hope you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. And I think that's another thing too, you guys, is she's used to being able to say and do a lot of things and get away with it, but this judge is seeing nothing of it. Yeah, it's about court procedure and practices. You know what I mean? You'll see as we get there. Jeff says, gotta admit, Anna's really good at characterizing things to look the way she wants you to see it. She could talk some into hopping on board and passing comment, like these cult members. Yeah. The thing is, and there's a lawyer that I watch, and I had covered this before he did yesterday. I think he covered it last night. And even he said exactly what I said, you guys, is just because Ann Taylor says something doesn't mean it's true. Okay? She is trying everything. And a lot of people seem to take her word and what she says as gold, as if it's evidence or not, or lack of. It doesn't mean that at all. Okay? Hello, Lisa. Okay, we're going to get started, you guys. Thank you, everybody who has come in. Please smash that like button. I only see 10 likes. Look at all the people we got in here. Only 10 likes. Come on, you guys. Let's get that up so we don't have to keep stopping. It's for your benefit too. That way I don't have to stop and repeat things because people are asking. We get everybody in here at the beginning so we don't have to do that. So please smash that like. Go on out, leave chat, go on out, smash that. When you come back in, make sure you have live chat selected at the top of your screen. Caddy just puffing her chest. Hello, Carol. Hello. Okay, let's get going, you guys. I see you guys starting to smash that like. Thank you. Okay, certified transcript. Here we go, you guys. So the stenographer, this is a lot of stuff we don't really need to know. The appearances, who's there for the state, who's there for the defense. The index, this is the defense witnesses that are about to be called. Okay, so as we see here, it says January 23rd, 2025, closed proceedings. Let me see if I can bump this up just a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so this first part here is just the judge asking who's there for who, etc., making sure that this is not being streamed. Okay. Okay, so the court says, all right, before we get going this morning, I understand the first portion of today's hearing. This is important, okay? The first portion of today's hearing will be to put on evidence related to the IGG suppression and Frank's issue regarding the IGG. And this is what I mean. You will see why Ann Taylor keeps getting reprimanded, okay? In terms of witnesses, what are we doing in terms of excluding and or exceptions to exclude based on experts? Ms. Taylor, Your Honor, the parties have stipulated that the witnesses may be inside the courtroom for the entirety of the proceeding. The state has their witnesses. That's a remote witness, and that's fine for the person to listen in. The court says, so the person is appearing remotely. Yes, Your Honor, that's correct. Court, do we have them up? No, they're not connected yet. Court, they're not connected. Did you give them a link? Did you ask for a link? Mr. Nye states yes. They let us know they received the link, but we're okay getting started, Your Honor. He doesn't need to be here. The court, I was told by my law clerk that the defense intends to refer to exhibits that they don't have copies here for the court. And here you go, we're already starting off. So Ann Taylor has said, I've got all these exhibits and everything else, but she didn't make copies for the court. And that's one thing that we know, like that you learn in law school. You guys, you always make 3 copies. One for you, one for the defense, one for the court. But again, Ann Taylor does her own way. She says, Your Honor, there was a stipulation that all of the exhibits were attached to the IGG motion and the Franks motion would be admitted, right? And if you remember, the judge said, break that 1,000-page motion down and just give us what you're going to show, what exhibits you're going to use. Don't put them all in there, just the ones you're going to use, etc. She says, I'm happy to give the court my copies. That was about 1,000 pages worth of stuff, so I did not print and haul down an extra copy, but I'm happy to give the court my copy if the court wants a hard copy. The court says, I've got a copy in the file. That's that 1,119 pages. But the court shouldn't have to rummage through it, all those pages, right? She should have only the pages that she intends to deal with today. He says the only problem is trying to find what you're talking about quickly if you're referring to a distinct item within that. Typically, I'm provided copies of the specific exhibits witnesses go over, but I'll do my best. Ms. Taylor, she says, I'm happy to provide the court my copy or use the Elmo so the court can see it, can see the display. She's totally ignoring procedure, and she's trying to talk her way around it, okay? Court says, all right, we'll do what we can. In the future, if you know what exhibits you're going to be talking about in particular, you should have 2 copies available for the court. I will, Your Honor. The court, anything to take up before we get started? They both say no. Defense, call your first witness. So Taylor calls Brett Payne. Just to make sure we're not live, right, Sandra? No, we're not live. Okay. The court, do you solemnly swear oh my gosh, here we go again today. Swearing him in. So Detective Payne saying his name and everything. I'm not going to go through all this. What do you do for a living? He says, I'm a detective corporal at the Moscow PD currently. She says, how long have you been there? 7 years. Prior to Moscow police, did you have law enforcement experience? Yes. What was that? I was in the military police corps, the U.S. Army for 3 years prior to coming to Moscow. Are you post-certified? Yes. In the course of your responsibilities with Moscow police, were you handling an investigation involving homicides at 1122 King Road? Yes, ma'am. What was your role? I was assigned lead detective after about the first 24 hours in that case. Question. Does that mean, I'm not going to keep saying question, answer, because I want to try and get through this. And does that mean you have responsibility for the case and evidence? Yes. Okay, as such, did you participate in a search for the suspect? Yes, ma'am. And when was the first time you heard Bryan Kohberger's name? First time I heard Bryan Kohberger's name was on December 19th, 2022. And what was that a result of? That was a result of the IgG genealogy, and that was being undertaken by the FBI. We had a phone call that evening, and we were told Bryan Kohberger's name. And before that, Mr. Kohberger was not on your radar? No. Before December 19th, was the FBI CAS team member collected with you? Yes. How long had he been collected with you? I don't remember exactly, but it had been several weeks at that point. And was that Nicholas Balance? Yes. What other FBI team members were collected with you? Goodness, a lot. We had technical assistant Maria Tindrell, S.A. Jacobson, and numerous other FBI special agents that were there to assist. By the time it was December 19th and you first heard of Bryan Kohberger's name, had you viewed videotapes? Give me a second, you guys. Yes. How many hours of videotapes do you think you reviewed? He says, I don't remember. A lot. I can't give you accurate representation. In those videotapes, did you focus on any particular ones that were of interest to you? Yes, ma'am. In particular would be the, are you talking about addresses that were, how would you like me to refer to them? She says, how you nicknamed the cameras. So he says the first one was from 1112 King Road. Okay, so what I'm going to do, you guys, crap. Okay, so I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to have to jump between the two. File, open. I'm going to show you where the cameras are. Okay, so we have these addresses. We have the 1112 King Road, Linda Lane, A&W, and the corner of, there was footage from A&W, which is the corner. Of Lauder and South Main, or Highway 95. There was footage from an address on Indian Hills, and there was also footage from Ridge Road camera, and that's how we've referred to them. Okay, so let's jump over here. Okay, so here is the King Road house right here. This is the 1112 King Road that they got that light socket camera from. There was a CCTV camera here, right here. There was the A&W camera right here. So here's the house over here. Here's this camera. There was another one here on Indian Hills Road. Okay. Now, what I'm going to show you, he was also spotted here at the Exxon gas station. And he was also spotted along here somewhere too. I don't have the addresses for those. Now, here is, I'm just going to show you this because it's going to come up. Here is the King Road house here. Here's one cell phone tower. There's two. There's one here. And if you go all the way up here, there's another cell phone tower up here. So that is quite a ways away from the King Road residence. Here is the cell tower that I believe that they used. Okay? Okay, so let's get back to this. Jeff H says the spot on Indian Hills is interesting. It overlooks the police department facility, right? I heard somebody else mention that too. Okay, so she says, with those references in mind and keeping December 19th in mind, which of those cameras were your focus before you learned of Bryan Kohberger? Before you learned of Bryan Kohberger's name? I would say all of them were important at that before that. And it was later that other cameras become important. Is that right? Those were the main ones we relied on for vehicles. In particular, is what those ones were. She says, I'm going to return to that in just a minute, but I want to talk to you about interviews. Did you interview any people in relation to the case before November 19th? Yes. And did other officers interview people? Yes. Were some of those people the roommates of the 1122 King Road home? Yes. Did you review other officers' work as well? Yes. Did you have regular meetings with other officers about the status of the investigation? Yes. Did you have any role in deciding to pursue IGG? Yes. It was a collaborative decision amongst the command team to go that route, but yes, I was part of that. Were you part of the discussions during the process of the identification? Yes. Were you aware that Othram Laboratories began the work on the investigative genetic genealogy? Yes. What kind of information did you receive from Othram? I don't remember what was received from Othram directly. I knew they were conducting their specific type of work. I don't remember exactly what they provided to us. Hello, Elizabeth. Hello, everybody coming in. Did you receive documents from them? Yes. Okay. Do you know how many documents you received from them? I do not. Was it one time or more than one time? I don't remember. Were you part of the discussion to take the work from Othram and go to the FBI? Yes. Why was that decision made? Answer. From my understanding, granted, this is my first encounter with the IGG. So again, as a collaborative discussion, we decided that because the Idaho State Police Lab and Othram had essentially exhausted their resources, this is how I understood it, that we would move to the FBI because they had more resources available to pursue this particular avenue. Do you know what more resources the FBI had? The only thing I'm privy to was that they had more databases that they could compare the sample to. That was the extent of my knowledge. Do you have familiarity with the databases and the rules that apply to those? No, ma'am. She says, I'll save those questions. What was your communications with the FBI about the IGG? Answer. So our communications were just via telephone. The sample was sent to the FBI. I don't remember the date it was given over to them, but after that, there were very few conversations. And if they happened at all, they were just telephonic, advising us that the process was still in the works and that they would let us know when or if they had anything of interest for us. Do you know what files or documents went to the FBI from Othram? I do not remember. Did you receive documents from the FBI in relation to IGG? Yes. I believe after the fact, after we received Kohberger's name, we did receive documents, but I don't remember what they were. Question. Do you know how many documents related to IGG you received from the FBI? No. I believe as part of discovery, it was in the thousands of pages, but that's just the best of my knowledge. She says, thank you for that. All right. So once you have Mr. Kohberger identified, what's your understanding of what that meant to have his name? Answer. In just relation to the overall investigation, is that, she cuts him off and says, yes. Answer. So the only thing that was given to us was Bryan Kohberger's name. That was it. It was conveyed to us by the FBI that it was to be taken as no more than a tip. That was it. So once we received his name, we set about doing basically an independent verification of whether or not he was involved in this crime. Annie says it seems to take some time to do DNA and Arthro, but they can do it in 48 hours in Pennsylvania. They were totally separate tests. Totally separate. And more in depth, these ones, because they had to go searching through database after database after database because there was no hit in the system. Okay, so where were we? Okay. I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit more. But do you know why the FBI connected Bryan Kohberger to the case? Answer. So on December 20th, if memory serves, we had a secondary meeting with the FBI via Teams, if memory serves, and they simply walked us through the family tree, how they did that. Now, I don't remember the details of all that. It was an in-depth conversation that, to be honest, is above my head. But they essentially worked their way through the family tree and arrived at a conclusion that Bryan Kohberger was a person we should look into as a tip. That's the extent of my knowledge of how they did that. Question. How was Bryan Kohberger the name you received as a tip linked to the case? Answer. He wasn't until after December 19th. What item of evidence did they link Bryan Kohberger to? Answer. I'm not sure what you're asking. As far as before December 19th is what you're referring to? Yes. We didn't have one at that point. Why did you become interested in learning the identity of Bryan Kohberger? That doesn't make sense because they were just looking for whoever's DNA that was on the knife sheath. And he says the answer, not quite sure I understand your question. We were interested in anyone who would have been involved in this case. The DNA from the knife sheath was obviously the one thing we had that we thought was a very strong piece of evidence in this case. So it was that particular piece that we pursued as a potential avenue of identifying a subject. Question. Is it your understanding that the FBI's work said that it was Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the sheath? Answer. That is not my understanding. What is your understanding? My understanding is that the FBI concluded that Bryan Kohberger was a possible source of DNA that we should look into. They did not, to my knowledge, at any point say Bryan Kohberger's DNA is on the knife sheath. That was never conveyed to me. So what they said is if you're looking for somebody to match that DNA on the knife sheath, look at this guy. Search him out. They didn't say that is his DNA. They said investigate it. Right? Do your own research, but here's his name. Here's the tip. So on December 20th, when that happened, when he's somebody you should look into, what did you do? Answer. We'd already started looking into him from the previous evening. So that day, December 20th, we began going through basically our sort of standard investigative procedures that we had been doing throughout the investigation for various leads, to include basic Department of Motor Vehicle searches, NCIC offline returns, NCIC searches. We have a database called TLO, which is a credit-based search we use to find basic information. So we started doing all of those things, looking for information on Mr. Kohberger. Question. And what you found is that he didn't have a criminal history. Is that right? Correct. Talk to me about going to Pennsylvania for the trash pull. Answer. Well, I was not in Pennsylvania for the trash pull. Question. I'll ask somebody else that later. All right. So after you received Bryan Kohberger's name, and he hasn't been on your radar at all before, is that right? Answer. Correct. Question. All right. You have pursued interviews and surveillance video. You have pursued evidence found inside the scene at 1122 King? Yes. What efforts did you make to pursue unknown male B? Answer. You have to be more specific. I don't exactly remember where the unknown male B came from. Now, see, everybody was saying that this unknown blood source was on the railing going from the second floor to the third floor. And this is why I say I don't go by what everybody's saying out there and people just guessing. I wait for facts, okay? We now all know about the blood on the handrails. It was not on hand rails. It was one area on a hand rail. one handrail. And Annie says, and why is that DNA not important when it wasn't from the dead people? Because he didn't come from the first floor to the second floor. Now, if it was on the railing from the second to the third floor, I get it. But let's see where that DNA sample was, okay? You have to be more. Okay, so the question Ann Taylor asked, if I told you the lab report showed unknown male DNA came from a blood spot on the handrail going between the second and first floor, does that help jog your memory? Yes, it does. So, why did they not think that that was important? Because they believe, just like my read said right at the beginning, before we even knew who Bryan Kohberger was, he came in through the sliding door. He went to the third floor. He went to the second floor. He never went down that handrail to the first floor. He came in. He went upstairs. He got Maddie and Kaylee. He came back down, got Ethan and Zaina, and then took off back out the back door. He never went down that railing. So that's why it wasn't at that point very important to them, because they had information that that's not the way he went from witnesses. Okay, why did you not pursue that person? At that point in time, we already had received Mr. Kohberger's name. And from what my understanding was, entering another DNA profile into CODIS would remove the previous one we had from the knife sheath. So if memory serves, the discussion will hold off. We'll stay with the one from the knife sheath. If we need to, we can address the unknown male B at a later time. Question. I want to make sure I understand your testimony. You were not aware of the unknown male DNA until after December 19th when you knew Bryan Kohberger's name? Answer. No, I was aware of that before. How about unknown male D? Again, you're going to have to be more specific. If I told you unknown male D came from a lab report from a sample of blood on some gloves, it wasn't some gloves, it was one glove outside the house, does that refresh your memory? Yes, ma'am, it does. You're aware of that too? Yes, ma'am. Question. I want to back up and talk about the affidavits. I think you told me in a prior hearing that you were the person that wrote Exhibit A or the affidavit in support of the search warrants when it came to looking for things about Bryan Kohberger. Did I understand that right? Yes. And that affidavit, when you began, was that on or about December 23rd to get records? Answer. As far as when I started writing the affidavit, is that what you're referring to? Question. The first search warrant that applied to Bryan Kohberger. Answer. I believe it was December 23rd. Yes. Question. When did you begin writing that affidavit? I didn't know that we believe that Dylan. PCA part. Adios. I'll see you later. Like, I'm reading what is in this. Like, don't shoot the messenger. I'm sorry you don't like what's being said, Annie, but this is what's being said. I get that a lot. A lot of people that think that Bryan Kohberger is innocent, they don't like it when evidence comes out. But anyway, let's continue. I began writing that affidavit long before that. It had been a running affidavit because at the beginning of it, there's a walkthrough of the crime scene. There's numerous things. It was a living document. So we just add information to it. I'd say the document started, I don't know, couldn't give an exact date, a couple of weeks prior to that, even before we knew Mr. Kohberger's name. So they started writing this affidavit long before they even knew any suspect. And that started when the walkthrough of the crime scene. That's where the affidavit starts. Okay, help me understand what parts were added after you knew Mr. Kohberger's name. Answer. Well, to walk down the line best I can, so obviously there's an initial component, which is the crime scene, the testimony from the roommates, Then after that, it shifts to, I believe, the first mention of, or the first component was that Bryan Kohberger was pulled over by Corporal Duke on a traffic stop. He was also contacted by WSU police. His vehicle was ran by WSU PD officers. Then after we included trying to walk down through the thing in without it in front of me. Then we included the vehicle information that was about the white Elantra. After that, we included his residence, and that this is like, then we included his residence and that he had hit LPRs, or his vehicle had been seen on LPRs between Moscow or Pullman, and Pennsylvania. And then there was the component about where he lived in Pennsylvania. Question. Let's go back to that time before you started adding the traffic stop. That affidavit contains some information that you gained from other officers. Is that right? Yes. Okay. And you didn't write large parts of that affidavit. Is that also right? Answer. I took a lot of language from experts and other officers, agents. That's correct. Question. Are you aware your affidavit, your living document, was claimed by other people as their own original document? Well, it wasn't just their own. It was fluid, and they just kept adding different officers. When they investigated something, they got information, they added it. Okay, so it was a living document. Not giving you credit, but claiming as their own. Are you aware of that? Answer, yes. Are you aware that you probably know because Nicholas Balance was co-located with you? Did the two of you continually work on a language to satisfy what the prosecutor wanted to see for probable cause? Yes. Did you and Nicholas Balance produce a map to show a possible route of travel for your suspect? Yes. This is getting outside of the scope of what this Frank's hearing was supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about the IGG. The judge is going to start getting a little upset about that she's going outside of the scope, so let's continue. Miss Taylor, and Your Honor, I'm at Defendant's 1A. I can either put it up here or approach the court with the map. The court, I can see what you're referring to. There's been a lot of Exhibit A's in this case. Just a housekeeping. You had mentioned you stipulated to the admission of sounds like a large chunk of records, 1,000 pages. Miss Taylor, yes, Your Honor. It's the stack of exhibits that came behind the amended Frank's motion from the defense. The court, okay, and you want me to search through that to find stuff that you want me to rely on? Miss Taylor, I don't. I'm happy to give you my copy again. Court, no, I don't mean that. Court, as you know, I entered an order in this case that I'm not going to scour the record to find things that support your claims in this case. You have to cite them particularly. And so I get concerned when I'm told I'm going to get a large document, over 1,000 pages, to be admitted that doesn't sound like it's going to be the focus of the actual hearing or much of it. Miss Taylor. Well, Your Honor, I do have quite a few more questions for this detective. I'm trying to be mindful of my role here with him as far as the Franks and his work with IGG. But when it's time for me to argue Franks, what I plan to do was to argue from the exhibits, identify them for the court, and hand the court my copy. So I don't expect the court to thumb through all the D1s, D2s. I just didn't bring another 1,000 pages with me. Court, I understand. My concern wasn't so much what I had in front of me as actual paper. My concern is littering the record with things that are not referred to. If you're going to refer to a specific document in there, that's fine. But don't expect me to go looking at things you don't refer to necessarily. Miss Taylor, oh, I absolutely understand that, Your Honor. Those were all put in so that counsel would be advised. Court, the fact that I admit this group of documents does not mean that it is something that can be relied on, absent you actually using it. Miss Taylor, absolutely. I understand that, Your Honor. I don't expect the court to read my mind. Thank you for that. Like she getting snarky. Yeah, the judge isn't playing. Question. So she's back to the detective here. I'm going to attempt to put this map up here. Is that the map you and Nicholas Balance came up with to help with probable cause? Yes. Thank you. I'm going to leave that there for just a minute, and I'm going to ask you some other questions. I want to back up to the part of the first affidavit. This is asking for AT&T records. Is that right? Here we go. Yes, ma'am. And this AT&T record, is that the first set, 48 hours of AT&T records? Yes, ma'am, I believe so. And are those AT&T records related to a phone Mr. Kohberger had? Answer, yes. Question, all right. And so in doing this affidavit, you have this working document, and I'm going to start with DM. If I say DM, do you know who I'm talking about? Answer, that's funny, Carol. Answer, yes, ma'am, I do. Question, and she is one of the roommates, is that right? The judge pipes in. We're sealed, meaning this is a sealed hearing. You can use the name. Miss Taylor, I can use the name? Trying to get a habit. Miss Taylor. So now they just redact, right? We know who they're talking about. They're talking about Dylan Mortensen, okay? Dylan Mortensen, who is she? She was one of the surviving roommates. And how many times was Dylan interviewed by law enforcement at the time you wrote this December 23rd report? Answer, if memory serves me, it was 4, I think, 3 or 4. In the affidavit, you wrote a statement that Dylan had heard Kaylee go upstairs, yell, someone's here, and run back downstairs. Is that correct? Yes. And you used the words she thought she heard. Do you remember that? Miss Jennings pipes in. Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is the prosecution. I'm objecting based on the scope of what this testimony is supposed to be. My understanding was it was limited solely to the issuance of a Franks and IGG. You see how she's trying to, Ann Taylor here is trying to have a trial within a trial, before the trial, okay? The court. So the judge says, I was just about to ask the question. I don't recall the statements of Dylan Mortensen being a subject of a motion to suppress separate from the Franks issue. Am I correct about that? Miss Taylor, that is correct, Your Honor. Judge, okay, so we're not at a Franks hearing on that issue. The only issue we are at a Franks hearing is on the IGG. Miss Taylor, all right, well, let me rephrase. Let me start from a different place. The judge, I'll sustain the objection. Miss Taylor, question. Let's go to the part of your affidavit for December 23rd, AT&T 1, the part where you put in things particular to Bryan Kohberger. You put in that affidavit a traffic stop, I believe, from August in Moscow, Idaho. Is that right? Yes. Question. That traffic stop was on your radar before December 19th when you learned of Bryan Kohberger's name? No. The next thing you relied on was a traffic stop at WSU. Is that right? Yes. Was that traffic stop on your radar before you knew Bryan Kohberger's name? No. You put in information about front license plates being missing from Pennsylvania cars. Is that right? Yes. The 1112 video did not show enough of the vehicle that you could see whether it had front license plates. Is that right? Yes, that sounds correct. So it was after you learned of Bryan Kohberger's name that you became that became part of your affidavit. Is that right? Yes. Let's talk about the vehicle identification for a minute before I run back down through the rest of the affidavit after Bryan was identified. When you worked with Special Agent Emel to identify a vehicle, was there more than one vehicle he identified? I don't believe there was. If memory serves, it was just the Hyundai Elantra. Would you agree that he was most comfortable with the years 2011 to 2013? Prosecution objects again. Object, Your Honor, for the same reason I don't understand the scope related to IGG. Miss Taylor, Your Honor, I'm going to ask for a little leeway on this one. I think it will be clear in about 2 more questions. She says this a couple times. It is a sealed proceeding. I'll be arguing it at Frank's. I don't want to pollute the record, so approach. Oh, the judge says, I don't want to pollute the record, so approach. So then they have a bench conference. Hello, Court of Public Opinion. Yeah, that was something new that we heard, that apparently Dylan had said that, and the way that she had said it. Um, what happened to the 8-hour freeze? Well, we haven't got to that yet. So all I'm doing is going by this court document. It's 175 pages. We're at page 27. So I'm sure that will come out. And I don't know if they're going to go over every single aspect of the probable cause. She's bringing out things that she feels should be thrown out or whatever. So let's just continue. I'm late. Thank you for streaming this. You are very welcome. Okay, so they have a bench conference. Miss Taylor comes back. Let me take a sip of my coffee here. My throat is getting dry trying to read this so fast. Okay. They looked at Miss Taylor. Ann Taylor says they looked for a 2011 to 13. It was their be on the lookout. That's what a bolo is. It was after Bryan was identified by IGG. They expanded the search. The court. So the judge says that relates to what? Ann says it's going to relate to Frank's, but it also has to do with the IGG and when they identified him. I have about 2 more questions along this line. Well, she's already said she only had 2 more questions, and I think now with these 2, that's going to be even more. Anyway, the judge says you have to separate Frank's motion regarding the scope of the car search. And absolutely. The judge, that we're not here for today. We're here for IGG. I get the idea that if the IGG is suppressed, the warrants based on IGG is suppressed, that affects a whole lot of other things, right? But I don't think you need to get into the evidence that at this point, because it's part of the Frank's hearing, there's a separate Frank's motion on that. Anne says there absolutely is. The next question I'm going to get to in the affidavit after IGG was the police in Pullman running the car, and he has laid it out in the affidavit after the IGG without stating it. So I'm doing the IGG part with him now. That car is a different year than the one on the BL, be on the lookout. That's as far as I'm going with the car at this hearing. Thank you, Jeff. That would be cool. That would be cool. Not today, though. Thanks. Is it because it's 175 pages, Jeff? But I appreciate that, and I may take you up on that. Thank you. So the judge says, counsel. The prosecution, Miss Jennings, says, I don't understand what that has to do with the IGG. It's part of a Frank's hearing related to the vehicle identification. I understand her timeline, but I think that point has already been made. And this was when I was allowed to explore this witness since he's already here and we paid him to come here. The judge, yeah, but I didn't open up everything to Frank's because we couldn't get into all the other things that, and then I think she interrupts him because of these lines here. I understand we could get into the entirety of the Franks on AGG, which is why I allowed it. And that's what we're going to so, and that's what we're going to stick to today. And IGG flows, it makes everything. The judge cuts her off. He says, well, I'm not suggesting that we get into other Frank's issues that sprung in part from IGG because those are separate based. Right? And so I think we need to just talk about the specific IGG stuff today in terms of Frank's. There's not a separate motion to suppress based solely on that and not the IGG. If I'm not mistaken, apart from the Frank's motion. Ann Taylor, to suppress which? I'm not following. I'm sorry. Hang on a sec, you guys. Sorry, like my throat is getting so dry. So Ann isn't following. The judge says there are motions to suppress that are not Frank's related. Miss Taylor, right. I'm not going there. The judge, that's evidence we can put on today, but I thought we were going to do that later today. Miss Taylor, absolutely. The judge, there are various Frank's motions, one of which is to suppress. One of the Frank's motion is that there was a Frank's violation by not informing the magistrate of the use of IgG in violations as you allege them in obtaining the IgG. That's the issue we are doing today in terms of evidence, and I want to stick to that. That's twice now he's had to say it. So getting into the car, which is separate, which I understand your argument is the IgG led them to expand the search of the cars, but that's not the Frank's issue itself. The Frank's issue itself is on IgG, is the IgG itself, and it's limited to that. All right. So the bench conference concluded. Oh, that was at the bench. So he chewed her out and said, stick to the IgG, stop it. This is what we're on. Okay. So now we're back to Anne questioning the detective that's on the stand. So Anne starts. All the things in the warrant that became particular to Bryan Kohberger were not on your radar before you learned his identity through IgG. Is that correct? Yes. And you elected not to put the IgG identification in your probable cause affidavit. Is that right? Yes. What led to that decision? That decision was a collaborative decision. We made that decision in an effort to independently verify the information that was provided to use as a tip from the FBI in much the same way we would any other tip in law enforcement. So it was not in any way made to obfuscate any sort of information. It was simply, we can validate Mr. Kohberger's involvement in this incident or we cannot. That was it. Oh. Question. As a group effort, you decided to intentionally leave that out of your affidavit? Yes. Ms. Taylor, given the limitation at this point, I think that's all my questions. The court. All right. Oh. Anyone, what is IgG? I'm embarrassed I can't remember. Investigative genetic genealogy. That's what IgG is. Investigative genetic genealogy. Okay, so now the prosecution is getting up and going to cross-examine this witness. Good morning, detective. Thank God. I only have one question for you. Let's go back to December 19th, December 20th, and the information that was provided to the team, correct? It was a team? Yes, ma'am. And who all was part of this team that was receiving this information telephonically from the FBI? Answer. So, there were several of us. Yourself, Mr. Thompson was there, Darren Gilbertson from the Idaho State Police, Ed Jacobson from the FBI. I believe there were a couple of other folks from the FBI, the ISP in the room. I don't remember exactly who they were, and then myself. There were numerous people that were involved. Question. Would it have been essentially the team leaders for the investigation? Answer, yes. Was this any different? I thought she only had one question, damn it. Was this any different than the other information sharing that occurred during this case? Not at all. There were routine team discussions? Yes, ma'am. We had 2 official briefings every day of the investigation, morning and evening. So twice a day we would all link up. And that was not just the command team. That was everyone who was not actively on an interview would come back to the police department, sit in the same room, and discuss the information that was learned from that day. So it was very common throughout this investigation for us all to be in the same room and discussing the same information. Question. Here. I thought she said she only had one question. She's getting as bad as somebody else we know. So you were not the only investigator receiving information from various sources? Absolutely not. So when we talk about this Exhibit A, that wasn't necessarily just your exhibit. No, ma'am, it was not. It was all the information that the investigators had up to that point. Yes, ma'am, that is an accurate statement. Now, another question. Jeff Wright? Aw, thank you, plucky little poppet. Jeff Wright? I'm saying, I thought she said she only had one question. Okay. Where was I? Okay, so now related to the IGG and the information you were provided by the FBI. In the information provided, did you receive any medical information about Bryan Kohberger? No, we did not. He says, ma'am. It's just an extra word to say. Um, Prosecution says, I don't have anything further. Thank you. Yay! The court, redirect, of course. Ann Taylor. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Miss Taylor. Miss Jennings was just talking to you about the team. I guess that got together a couple times a day from November 13th until December 19th or 20th is our target time now, right? Yes. Who from the FBI was part of these daily meetings? He already answered that. Like I said, S.A. Jacobson was there. Maria Tyndall was there. I believe Special Agent Rob Hill was there. I'm trying to think of other names. I don't remember any. There were others there. I just don't remember who they were. I apologize. That's okay. How about who else from the Moscow Police Department? Answer. So Captain Blaker was there, I believe. Usually Detective Vargas was there. Sometimes Chief Fry would sit in on those meetings. Most nights Chief Fry would sit in on those meetings. Captain Dallinger, Anthony Dallinger was in on those meetings from MPD. I'm trying to think of all the others. Basically, the whole command team from Moscow Police Department itself would be in on those meetings, and whoever else was available from the investigation section would also come in. Question. Who from ISP was there? Darren Gilbertson was there, I believe. Detective Joe Lake was there most days. I can't remember who else was consistently there. I remember those two for sure. Lieutenant Mike Mooney was in those meetings. That was the three off the top of my head. When was the first time you talked about the identification of Bryan Kohberger in these meetings? Answer. As far as we knew of him, yeah, December 19th. How many hours of meetings do you think you've had up until the identification of Bryan Kohberger? Goodness, many. I don't know. It was a lot. Twice a day, every day? Yes. 7 days a week? If not more than that, yeah. Miss Taylor, thank you. That's it. Whew. So we're at page 35, you guys. Well, 36. That's the end of 36. Okay. I wish there was a more comfortable way for me to sit. Let me see if lowering my chair helps a little bit. Let's see. I'm going to put this up here. I've got to try and get comfortable, you guys, because this is killing my back. I think it must be super reassuring to know that an attorney who spent so much terribly long time in school is completely unable to count the number of questions. That was the prosecution. Like, she's getting as bad as somebody we know because she said only one question, and then she went on to dole out a whole bunch of questions, right? So, yeah, they're both, it's not just Ann Taylor, it's a couple of them, right? Understand those that think Gillian plans to push after us, fellow. Okay. The court. Thank you, detective. You can step down. Don't mind me, you guys. I just lowered my seat, so I got to lower everything else, including my mouse. Okay. Defense can call its next witness. Miss Taylor, I'm sorry. You can call your next witness. Rylene Nowlin. Do you saw? Okay, so they're going to swear Rylene in. Good morning. Who are you? I think you've done this before a few times. How are you employed? I'm employed. Okay, so this Nolan is employed as a forensic laboratory manager with the Idaho State Police Forensic Services Laboratory in Meridian, Idaho. Meridian. Excuse me, because sometimes I get my French and English mixed. How long have you worked for Idaho State Police Forensics Laboratory? I've worked for Idaho State Police Forensic Services since November 2002. Oh, since 2002. So, like over 20 years. Do you have prior experience similar? Prior to my experience with ISP, I did not. How were you trained for your job? I have formal education. I was originally hired. Okay, we don't need to go through all this. Organizations, which ones? If you guys want to slow it down or pause it and read this, you can. I'm not going to read through all her qualifications and everything. Okay. Okay. Okay, so I guess it starts up here. Yes, are you a part of a collaborative? Yes. She's just given all her credentials up here. That is a group comprised of laboratory management. Typically, it depends on which portion or section, subsection of the collaborative that have gathered together to generate ideas for best practices and guidelines for new technologies coming into forensics. Would you investigate genetic genealogy? Would investigative genetic genealogy, oh my God, okay, IgG, I am going to say IgG, be a new technology coming into forensics? That is one of the technologies. However, our group refers to it as FIG, F-I-G-G, Forensic Investigative Genetic Genealogy. So if you guys are going to ask why I'm saying FIG, I'm not trying to not swear. This is what they're calling it, Forensic Investigative Genetic Genealogy. Try and say that fast. FIG. Okay, I'll try to remember that. That's the one I want to talk about today. So your group is talking about best practices for FIG. Is that right? That's one of our areas of focus, correct? Are you doing that because there are practices that are important in that discipline? Answer. We are doing that because it's a new technology coming into forensics world, and not every laboratory manager has a background in DNA. We also have a group on firearms because not every laboratory manager has a background on firearms. And it's just a resource for those managers as they're looking to implement new technologies. Right? It's just like, oh my God. You mentioned best practices. Does that have anything to do with things that I might refer to as standards or procedures or protocols? Answer, no. Question, what does best practices mean? Answer, best practice is a recommendation based on the current knowledge in the field. There are organizations that come up with standards for different fields, but this group, that is not their purpose. Question, in your lab, do you have standards and procedures and protocols? Answer, our lab does have. We call them analytical methods, as well as our quality system. Question, analytical message and quality systems means the same thing as procedures and protocols? Yes. What does that mean to you? What that means to me, our laboratory is an accredited laboratory, so we have a set of accreditation standards that we must meet. In order to do that, we have set quality policies as well as the analytical methods for each discipline. That ensures that we are consistently performing our specific analysis in a way that has been validated and shown to be proper for the testing that's being conducted. It also shows that we are meeting the national standards by which we are accredited. In addition, DNA has additional standards that they must meet called the FBI's Quality Assurance Standards for forensic casework laboratories, as well as for forensic databasing laboratories. Whew. And if I happen to say a word wrong or whatever, you guys, you don't have to point it out. I'm doing my best, okay? I'm tired, I'm sick, and I don't have much time. Anyway, question. Excuse me. I want to start with the first part of it. You mentioned, I think, that there's standards and protocols. My definition of them that helps assure your work so that somebody could look and see what you did and maybe get the same result or understand what you did. Do I understand that right? Yes, it's the methods we follow. And yes, that would be the one application someone could look and see what we did. Question. Now you mentioned at the very end what you told me before, DNA has something separate. Correct. What do you mean? Answer. Because our laboratory is a participant in the National DNA Index System, it's commonly referred to as CODIS, which stands for Combined DNA Index System. We are subject to additional standards set forth by the FBI because they manage that database. What are those standards? Those standards are known as QAS standards. They cover everything from when I listed the classes I had at the beginning. They decide what classes a DNA analyst coming in should have, what education a DNA technical leader should have, what things need to be included in a validation study, how facilities need to be controlled. It covers the gamut of testing. Validation study, what does that mean? Whenever a new chemistry, a new instrument, a new procedure is coming online in the laboratory, we perform a study to ensure that that chemistry, instrument or procedure is working or receiving the expected results. Okay, and to be sure, you have to do that because you use CODIS? Answer. Our DNA section has to do that because we use CODIS. The rest of the laboratory, because of part of our accreditation standards. Tell me what CODIS is briefly. Oh my gosh. CODIS is Combined DNA Index System. It is essentially a national DNA database. It exists on 3 levels. There's a local level, your country, your county sheriff's office, local PDs. There's a state level, which is typically the state laboratory. It is limited to public laboratories, and then the national level. In Idaho, the Idaho State Police Forensic Service Lab in Meridian is the only DNA lab in the state. So there are no local labs in the state of Idaho. And the database contains different entities. There's a forensic index. Those are profiles obtained from items of evidence. There's an offender index. Those are samples from those convicted of qualifying offenses in your state as determined by your state legislature. If your state legislature follows arrestees, there's an arrestee index. There's also a missing persons index and for remains. Question. Do you have any special role within the CODIS database? Currently, I'm a CODIS user. That is my only role at the moment. What was your role in the fall of November 2022? Answer. A CODIS user. Do you have any administrative responsibilities with CODIS? No, not currently. Have you in the past? In the past, I have served as the alternate state administrator for Idaho. Question. For CODIS DNA that goes into CODIS, what kind of profile is used? If I'm understanding the question correctly, there's different types of DNA profiles, and what goes into CODIS is known as the STR profile or short tandem repeat. Question. What kind of information is in a short tandem repeat or STR? Answer. I can give a brief explanation about DNA. Sure. So DNA is a substance that's found in the cells of our body. It acts as a blueprint. It tells our bodies what form to take and how to function. Between individuals, it is over 99% the same. That is why we all have the same basic structure and our bodies function in basically the same way. In forensics and in STRs, we are targeting that less than 1% that is unique to an individual with the exception of identical twins. And so areas of DNA that vary widely between individuals don't code for anything typically. So it doesn't tell us anything about a person. When I look at an STR profile, I can tell you if that person is genetically male or genetically female, and that is all. Do you know what an SNP profile is? Answer, I do. What is that? An SNP profile is a single, no, hell no. Nucleotide? Polymorphism? Okay, who wants to take over reading? Jeff? Calling Jeff? So you're looking at a single whatever, whereas the STR is a series of repeating whatever, a specific repeat that we're looking for. Question. The SNP then, is that a closer look at that person's... No? The Court of Public Opinion. Nucleotides. Thank you, Court of Public Opinion. I'm going to forget. You know that, eh? Nucleotide. I'm just going to highlight it. And that's what that means, you guys. What the Court of Public Opinion just said. Nucleotide. Jeff's out. I studied, the Court of Public Opinion says, I studied this stuff at university when they just discovered DNA in the 80s. Wow. I should have you up here reading this. Okay. So I'm just going to highlight words that I can't say because I'm just not smart when it comes to this shit. And hopefully the Court of Public Opinion can, if he or she, I don't know if you're a he or a she in there, go feel free to spell it out so people know what it is. Perfectly okay. I said, like, we're here for it. Thank you so much. Okay, the SNP then is that a closer look at a person's genome. I know there's letters in there that aren't pronounced. Anyway, just like French. And I get my French and my English mixed a lot. Oh, I would like to state that I'm not an expert in SNP. I'm not qualified in the SNP technology and have not ever been qualified in the SNP technology. With STRs, depending on the chemistry, you're looking at anywhere from 13 to 25 plus locations. With SNPs, my understanding is in general, you're looking at a minimum of 10,000. Ooh. Does that mean there's more information about a human contained in an SNP than there is in an STR profile? Mr. Nye. Prosecution standing up. Your Honor, I'm going to object at this point. This witness is not disclosed as an expert. She just testified she's not an expert in SNP technology. The judge. I appreciate that with respect to her answer, and I will take that into account in the event the defense intends to rely on that testimony. I took it as a sort of background about her general knowledge. I'll allow it for now, but I'm not taking it as expert testimony about that SNP beyond the basic understanding of what SNP is. Ms. Taylor, thank you. Question. Do you remember my question? Yes. I would assume if you're looking at a larger part of the human genome, that you would be getting a larger amount of information about someone. I have one more question about CODIS, and then I want to move in a different area. You mentioned that there's 4 indexes, and you talked about a forensic index, correct? What is that one used for? The forensic indexes were profiles generated from items of evidence can be uploaded. There are rules about what can be uploaded, though. It cannot match someone known to be the victim of a crime. It cannot match someone whose DNA should be in a place outside of a crime being committed. It cannot be anything taken directly from a suspect of a crime where you would reasonably assume their DNA would be present. It must be related to a crime, and it must be believed to be from the putative perpetrator of that crime. Somebody told me that I could have IA read this, but we would be here for days. Anyway, let's continue. So if I understand it, you use DNA, get STR, and only under certain circumstances you can use CODIS. Do I understand that right? Correct. Okay, give me a second, you guys. If this continues, I do have my cough medicine. I thought they can use 23andMe. I checked the yes box for crime investigations. There's 2 that they're allowed to use and 2 that they're not allowed. So I don't know. Apparently, they did use the 2 that they were allowed to use and got nothing. So that's when they gave it to the FBI, because the FBI don't care. The FBI can do what they want. So the FBI used the other databases that don't like the FBI using, or law enforcement using them, but the FBI can do what they want. And very rare are they held accountable. So that's why they say, we're giving this a tip. We're not giving you this. We're not giving you that. We're giving this to you. This is a name. They gave a name based on what they found in an IG, in the family tree through one of the sites that they shouldn't have used, but there's no loss. Anyway, it's a big kerfunkle, you guys. It's a big kerfunkle. I'm just reading it. Okay. Okay, outside of CODIS, and I understand what that does. If you create a profile, a DNA profile of somebody, is that a separate thing you do in your lab, even if you're not going to run them through CODIS? Yes. When we receive items of evidence or samples from known individuals, we generate a DNA profile from those. Did you become involved in the homicide in Moscow from 2022? Involved as the manager of laboratory in Meridian. I haven't actually done any work on any evidence in the case or issued any reports. All right, it's fair to say you did not go to that residence then. Correct. As the lab manager, do you understand about what evidence has come into the lab from that case? Answer. There was a lot of evidence submitted. I have a general knowledge of items that have come in, but I could not provide you a detailed list off the top of my head. That's okay. I won't ask you to. She says, thank you. As a lab manager, are you aware of different bits of testing that were done related to this case? In general, yes. Are you aware of a profile called Unknown Male A? Yes. Where did that come from? To my recollection, get it together, Willow. Where was I? To my recollection, Unknown Male A came from a swab taken from a knife sheath that was submitted by Moscow police. Are you aware of an Unknown Male B? I believe that was another sample from hearing the previous testimony that was from in the house. I would only want you to testify from your own base knowledge. From my own memory, I don't recall exactly where B was from. Fair enough. Thank you for clarifying. Are you aware that IgG or forensic IgG was used in this case? Yes. What was your role in that? My role specific to this case was facilitating the signing of a memorandum of understanding, making sure all parties received it and had signed it. Those parties being the police agency, the prosecuting attorney's office, as well as a member of the ISP management team. And then when the preliminary report was received, my job was to look over it, ensure that it had all the required pieces in the report, and then to authorize payment of the invoice for that testing. Okay. What role did you have with the laboratory that was going to perform the FIGG work? Oh my God. As far as how we came into contact with them, so when the ISP decided to pursue a contract with the laboratory that could perform the SNP testing that we talked about earlier, we're a state agency, so we don't just get to call up anybody and hire them. So we had to go through a bid process. So part of my role was developing a scope of work for that invitation to bid, as in what we expected the vendor to perform. And then when the bids came in, I was involved in the team that evaluated the documents that were submitted. And then ultimately the division of purchasing determined who won the bid. Did Idaho State Police Forensics have a contract with this laboratory, Othram? They were the winning bid through that process. And so they were under contract with the Department of Purchasing, correct? Is the contract with the Department of Purchasing that you perform these services and we pay you for them, essentially? Or does it have to more meat, or does it have more meat to it to talk about some of the things that you were talking about? How you help develop, I guess, the job description and what would be required? Answer. I'm not really familiar with the Department of Purchasing's day-to-day operations or how they operate. My role was strictly developing that scope of work. We expect them to develop the profiles that can be uploaded to the public genealogy databases. We expect them to provide us a written report. We expect the report to contain certain things, to have a header, to have a date, to list the case number, have page numbers, those kinds of things. Oh my God. Okay. Outside that description of the scope of work and the requirements, did your lab have a separate contract with Othram that basically said you agree to do these things? Answer. We had that they won the bid from Division of Purchasing and the state's contract for performing the work. You mentioned a memorandum of understanding you helped facilitate to be signed by the parties. Was Othram one of the parties that signed that? No. This is a memorandum between the law enforcement agency, the prosecuting attorney's office, and the laboratory. Question. And in that memorandum of understanding that indicated that the interim the Department of Justice interim policy applied. Is that right? Answer. I believe it did. I don't have the exact text memorized. Question. If I showed you a copy of that memorandum of understanding, would that help you remember if that was part of it? Answer. Yes. Your Honor, if I have just a moment to gather that, it's not being offered as an exhibit. The judge says, just refreshing. It's to aid in her memory. Court, show it to the state counsel. So I guess she did. Okay. Anne's back at questioning. Does looking at that refresh your memory as to whether the Department of Justice interim policy applied? Answer. It does say in the first paragraph that it did apply. Taylor. And, Your Honor, I'm going to refer to Defense Exhibit D19 here and ask the witness be shown that, and then I'll provide the court my copy. The judge says, when was this filed? Anne, that would have been filed with the amended Frank's memorandum on the bottom of that page. I'm sorry, the judge. I got thousands of filings. I have to go by the date to find things. Miss Taylor. I think it was November 18th or 20th. At the bottom of that page, however, you can see some numbers in red, and those were numbered to make it easier to find. The court. I just need to find it in the computer first, all right? I found it in my printed documents. Miss Taylor, is that the Department of Justice interim policy? Yes, the Department of Justice interim policy on forensic genealogy, DNA, and analysis and searching. Question. And in section 7, I believe it's section 7 or page 7. Answer. Investigative caution. That section. Question. Let me ask you the question. Are you familiar with the provision in that policy that says if there's a prosecution case, if somebody is arrested and there's a prosecution case, all items in the forensic investigative genetic genealogy should be preserved for court purposes? Answer. I believe that's part of it. I don't think it's in section 7. It might be, but I believe that is part of preserving. Question. Okay. What I want to know is, what did Othram preserve? Answer. I don't know. What did you get back? We received a preliminary report. In other cases, we will sometimes get back the DNA extract that was sent to them. I don't recall if we... Hang on a sec. I'm going to sneeze. Hang on. Oh my gosh. Sorry about that. You guys did not need to hear that. Like I said, I'm at the end of this cold. So we're only at page 54, you guys, out of 175 pages. I'm hoping to get through this witness here, and then we will take a break, and I will have to do the rest of it on Monday, because tomorrow I have my live with my reads. Okay. Would validation be part of that? Validation studies? Answer. I wouldn't assume so. I wouldn't assume that would be part of this, no. Would bench notes be important? The judge cuts in and says, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What notes? Ann Taylor says, bench notes, lab bench notes. Court, thank you. The witness, for our laboratory, we designate those as part of our case record. I'm not familiar with what Othram designates as part of their case record by Miss Taylor. So I guess then that means you don't have any of those. Answer, no, only the preliminary report. All right, I will move to a different area of questioning, and it's about the requirements of Authrum. You mentioned the goal was to create profiles and create a report, but to search public databases. Correct. There are public IgG databases that will allow entry of law enforcement samples, and that is part of the scope of work. They were required to enter it into those databases. Question, and are you aware there are databases that do not allow law enforcement to search? Yes. Were you part of work after Authrum began their work to try and do an investigation? I was not. As far as I guess I'm unclear. We received evidence, submitted it to the laboratory before, during, and after for all sections. Is that what you're referring to? Question. Let me rephrase my question. I think that question was too broad. While Authrum was doing their work, were you part of any work to help Authrum? For instance, did you get any documents that you did some research on to try and help them? No. Were you aware that Authrum was just stopped from doing any further work at some point? I was aware of that. And was this before they produced any result? No. We received a preliminary report. I recall receiving that because that's how I know I can approve payment of the invoice. So I know we received that prior to them being told they were stopped. Question, were you part of the decision to stop them? I was not. How did you find out about it? I found out about it in an email from my laboratory systems director. Do you remember when that happened? I don't recall. Does the forensics lab continue to contract with Authrum? Yes. If Authrum had a file that would have had validation studies and bench notes, anything they did on the case, who would have received that? Again, validation studies would be odd to associate with individual cases, so I wouldn't assume they would do that. Again, I'm not familiar with their procedures. And as far as who would receive documents, usually it would be, I would assume, the agency which we received that preliminary report. You mentioned you're not familiar with their procedures. Not in detail, no. What procedures are you familiar with? For Authrum? Yes. As part of the bid process, all of the bidders were required to submit, I believe they were required to submit their procedures, and it was essentially just looking over them to say, yes, they have a procedure in place for extracting DNA. Yes, they have a procedure in place for doing SMPs. So yes, they meet the minimums for the invitation to bid. But again, I'm not qualified in that technology, so I wouldn't have studied them or rendered an opinion on them. Ugh. I won't ask you for your opinion on them. I won't ask you to quote them to me, but you saw those? Yes, at the very beginning of the bid process. Okay, let's switch gears. In the case we are here for today, do you recall there being a trash pull? Court reporter, I'm sorry, there being a what? A trash pull. I recall receiving evidence from a trash pull, correct. What role did you have in deciding anything about the trash pull? Nothing about the trash pull occurring. I do recall there being a brief, I can't remember if it was a phone meeting or a video meeting, and just being asked in general what items from someone's trash are good for DNA. Did you give advice? I don't know if it was me specifically or another member of our DNA unit, but we did offer suggestions on items that are good for DNA. Did you receive items to test? Yes. What instructions were you given about those items? A discussion was a person of interest had been developed and to analyze the items from the trash to determine if they could be inclusive of the DNA profile that was developed from the knife sheath, unknown male A. Question, what date was that you received the trash? The trash was received into the laboratory on December 28th. So you were looking for a male profile, correct? All right, did you find male profiles? I didn't perform the actual testing, but yes, there were male profiles developed. How many? I don't know. Do you know anything about either male profile or any of them? I believe one of the male profiles designated as E was determined they could be a biological parent or child of the profile from the knife sheath. Are you aware that Bryan Kohberger's DNA was in the trash? I was not aware. Did you become aware? I became aware later. We didn't have his name at that time. You didn't know his name on December 28th? No, I did not. Okay. Were you on December 28th? Were you aware that not male E, but another male profile had been identified from the trash? The trash pull? I knew there was some mixtures of DNA that were also included. One of the mixtures, did it have a male DNA profile? I believe it did. And wasn't that profile the major component of that profile with a minor female? I believe that sounds correct. And later, didn't that return to Bryan Kohberger? We actually did not perform that comparison. Did you and I have a discussion a few days ago? We did. Did you tell me that you knew that to be Bryan Kohberger's DNA? I said I thought that was, and I could not find the report where he had done that comparison. I've since looked through, and we did not make that comparison, so I cannot say that he was included in that mixture. Our laboratory did not do that comparison. But a DNA profile was made for that mixture, is that right? Yes. And there's a minor female and a major male. That is my understanding. And could you, by eye, look at that and tell that's Bryan Kohberger, couldn't you, if you wanted to? If I wanted to, I could probably look, but I did not. Okay, you could still do it today if you wanted to. Answer, if there was a request to do the comparison again, we don't do a visual comparison, evidence to evidence. Our procedures don't allow us to do that for probative comparisons. Question, I need you to help me understand that a little bit. I'm having that question because I understand there was an unknown male B found on lab item 30. Do you know what I'm talking about? No. Okay. Well, I also understand that there was a cigarette butt taken from somebody in connection with the case investigation. Are you familiar with that? I am familiar with that. And that was compared to the DNA on the knife sheath, right? Yes. And was that found to be excludable? Am I using the right word? It was an exclusion, correct. So it wasn't who smoked. Who smoked? Because they compared a cigarette butt. Who smoked? Come on, you guys. Because there was a lot of people's names that was being thrown around. Who smoked? Because they got a cigarette butt that they compared to the DNA that was found on the knife sheath. Nah, I don't believe that the knife was planted, the sheath was planted at all. Okay, so you compared something that was taken from somebody to an item of evidence. Is that right? Something that was secondary reference, as in someone identified it as they saw that person using that item. They saw that person dispose of that item. That item was collected and used as a reference sample from that person because there was someone who said that is from that person. Okay, when you got the trash to go through in the lab, you knew that you were looking for a male, right? Correct. And you knew that the male and his family members lived in a house that produced that bag of trash. Is that right? Yes, but not who produced each individual item in the trash bowl. Okay, it wasn't labeled. This water bottle is from a person of interest. This tissue is from sibling. This Q-tip is from a parent. So in other words, she's saying they didn't write their name on everything that was in the trash. And one of those items you took and developed male E. I did not, but yes, the laboratory did. In general, the lab developed male E, correct, and compared male A and male E. There was a paternity statistics calculated because they were both single source profiles, meaning only from one individual. Oh. Answer. Okay, and there's another male profile. That was part of a mixture, to my knowledge, meaning more than one person's DNA was present on that item. Question. Again, only one male, though. Is that right? Answer. So when there's a mixture of an item on evidence, I don't know if you want me to explain the process. Hang on. The first step is determining the number of contributors to that mixture. Then our laboratory utilizes a software program to help break out the components of that mixture. When one individual is male, it's not always possible to say the gender of the second. Males have X and a Y chromosome. Females only have an X. So if there's an X and Y present, it could be one male. It could be two males. It could be a male and a female. Without comparing to known reference samples, I can't say that. And I haven't seen the profile to my knowledge. Question. Okay, did you tell me though on that sample, I'm talking about 9591, that was a male and a female? Answer. I believe that, I don't know if it was designated as that in the laboratory report. To my knowledge, it was. I can't remember what the report said. Again, I didn't generate the report and didn't do the work, so I'm not as familiar with it as if it was my own work. Question. Okay, male B was also a mixture, wasn't it? I don't know. Okay. If it was designated as unknown male B, again, I don't know if it was from a mixed sample or not. Miss Taylor, Your Honor, if I may just have a moment, thank you. Just a couple other questions for you. As it relates to the male E, it was compared to the sheath. Is that right? Correct. A paternity comparison. Male E profile was compared to a lot of other evidence items in this case, wasn't it? Correct. And you are allowed to do manual interpretation per your policy, right? If there is, so it's not black and white. So if it is a single source, we can look at it and say that that person is excluded. They are not the source of the DNA. Then yes, that can be done manual, and by manual, I mean in person looking at it. If it's a probative comparison, and how we define a probative comparison is if it's saying something about who could be the source of the DNA on an item of evidence that's relevant to the case, then no, we don't do a manual comparison and issue a statement about that because of all our standards. We have to issue statistics so that the trier of fact has something to gauge how unique that could be. What is the likelihood that that DNA could be from someone else? We provide that statistic. We don't just say it matches. That requires this statistical calculation, which we use as the probability software to do so. Question. I apologize. I think I got lost in there. Are you telling me it was a mix? You couldn't have done manual interpretation on 9591? Answer. Because it's a mixed profile and because if it was, you're saying it was Bryan's DNA. Bryan Kohberger's DNA present, that would be a probative comparison in the case, which we have to provide a oh gosh, it's almost time to quit, you guys. Statistic in order to make that statement. In order to deconvolute a mixture, we are no longer allowed to do these manually. Deconvolute, as in separate the mixture into its components. We have a software that does that. That software was not designed for, nor was it validated for doing evidence to evidence comparisons. Question. Now you're speaking my language. Validations are important for integrity. Is that right? Oh, God. Oh. In forensics, our laboratory uses validations to ensure any new tool is working properly. Question. Now, at some point later, your lab issued a report saying matching the DNA on the sheath with DNA taken from Bryan Kohberger. Is that right? That's correct, and a statistic was provided. Now I want to talk about what we're talking about when we say sheath. You're familiar with what happened with the sheath for swabbing, is that right? Answer. I seen the sheath and I know how our laboratory performs swabbing of evidence, but I did not swab that item of evidence, nor did I see it being swabbed. As I understand it, though, you've read the lab notes. At one point, I believe I did read the notes. I think I was asked a question and the analyst was out of town or something. Question. And I think you answered that question to law enforcement after consulting somebody else who was with the swabber when the sheath was swabbed. Is that right? It's sounding familiar. If I understand the lab reports, it's a single source on the knife sheath. Is that right? Correct. Does that mean it's only one person in that area? Yes, that was detected through testing. Tell me where you think that sheath was swabbed for purposes of DNA collection. She just said she didn't swab it. Anyway, answer. I believe the analyst swabbed there's kind of a snap or a button that was on top of the snap. That's the area that was swabbed. There was other areas on it sampled as well. For the purpose of unknown male A, that you're telling us later came back to Bryan Kohberger, that's the only place I want to talk about right now. Are we on top of the button, the outside or the inside, the socket portion of the button? Answer. I know on the top. I don't recall if she swabbed the underside or not. I'd have to look at her notes again. Do you know if that sheath was part of that preserve for fingerprinting? The swabbing was done first. That's our laboratory standard order of processing. If DNA is needed and fingerprints, they will work together. Essentially, latents, fingerprints will say we can see some possible ridge detail. So if you can avoid this area after DNA says we want to swab this, then they come to the decision of what would best suit the item of evidence to determine where to swab. So the swabbing takes place first. Question. I think I don't have any other questions right now. Thank you. Oh, okay. So we're at page 70, you guys. And this is where I think we are going to stop. Because I've been reading nonstop for an hour and 41 minutes. We are going to have to pick the rest of this back up and do it in sections come Monday. So Monday will be part 2. And let me mark this down what page I'm at so I don't forget. Okay, so we are at page 70. Questions from Anne. Next is okay, so page 70. And look at that. They took a recess. Let's take 10 minutes and we'll be back. Okay, so that's where we're going to wrap it up right now, you guys. Thank you so much. Should be sitting in his face, yeah. I know that there was a lot that Anne was asking of this person that she didn't do necessarily. There was others, so that's why we have more witnesses. I think there's like 2 or 3 more. Lips getting sticky. No, my throat. It's my throat. Throat getting dry. So we will pick up right here where we left off. We will pick up for part 2 on Monday. So I am going to make this part 1. So watch for part 2. And hopefully I will have enough resting of my throat that I'll be able to get through quite a bit more on Monday. Yes, may you all have a blessed weekend. Don't forget tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, I will be doing the mini read. So if you want your very own mini read, come on in 1 p.m. Eastern and get your very own. Yeah, lips getting sticky, everything getting sticky. Thank you. And thank you for being here, Court of Public Opinion. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. So I'm going to end it today like I always do. Okay, Mitch, you're very welcome. Yes, it does take time. And today, time is what I don't have because I've already, like I said yesterday, I already made plans for this afternoon. So I got a dinner to get to, and so I got to get ready for that and everything. So, but it was so great having you guys all here. I love your comments. I love being able to go back and forth, and you guys even in chat going back and forth. I love it. This is a safe place for all. We can differ on opinion, you guys. Like, some people think the sheath was planted. I don't think it was, but you know what? I respect everybody's opinion, and we could just agree to have a difference of opinion and stuff. As long as we're nice about it, I have no problems with it. So, with that being said, I'm going to wrap it up like I always do, and I will see you guys for part 2 on Monday. For those of you who want mini reads, I'll see you tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern. Until then, please take care of yourselves. Please stay safe. Always be aware of your surroundings.